Welcome to the Jump Ball Podcast. I'm your host, Mo Dakiel, and today my guest is Andrew Sharp from Sports Illustrated. We're going to definitely dive into Jimmy Butler's trade demand, which leaked about an hour ago, just before we started recording. And we're going to dive into the whole Eastern Conference, what teams we like and what teams we don't. Just a side note, you can now catch the podcast on YouTube. I'll throw some video clips in there from time to time for stuff we're talking about, but overall just a way for you guys to listen while you're at work and not doing your job because, I want to keep distracting you. So, you ready to tip it off? Andrew, how you doing?
Not too bad, man. I saw the rundown you sent this morning where we were going to touch on the Jimmy Butler stuff and then dive into the Southeast Division. And now it's hard to talk about anything but Jimmy Butler. I'm sure we'll do it, but things have gotten pretty real. And so I'm kind of just sort of picking up the pieces of my brain this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I was going to a movie last night with a friend of mine, and I looked at him as we were walking in, and it was around like 6:30, and we knew of the meeting was going down last night. We knew it was going to be the meeting in L.A., Tibbs and Butler. I was calling it the Summit, and,
Yep.
I turned to my buddy, and I just said to him, I'm like, I fully expect that there will be a trade request by the time I get out of this movie. And
Yes.
And I just turned off my phone. I said, I'm going to enjoy the Predator movie, which was awesome. I highly recommend it. And when I got out, I was like, oh, no trade request. I was like, oh, that's shocking. I thought I was 100% sure it would break last night. But, of course, it broke an hour before we decided to pod. But, man.
Well, it's funny the way it all played out, too, because I was checking on Monday. I had to write something for Tuesday, and so I was like, oh, this is great. Jimmy's going to request a trade on, like, Monday afternoon, and then I'll write about it for Tuesday morning, and that's perfect. And then it didn't happen, and then we found out that the meeting in Minnesota was moved to L.A., which is not a great sign if you're the Wolves, first of all.
No.
And then, I think I knew in my head, I knew that this was probably going to end with a trade request, but in my heart, it's just so weird, like we've never really seen a guy 10 days before the season request a trade. I hope it happens more often going forward. It's a nice way to get everyone hyped for basketball returning. But it's strange. I'm not used to thinking critically about trade destinations in mid-September.
Yeah, no, it's going to be the whole other wrinkle about it is all these guys who were free agents that were signed in the summer, in particular for the Lakers, like how the Lakers really can't get involved until December 15th, even if they want to, because they signed all these guys, and then there's that whole day you can't trade these guys, till I don't even know how long the time period is, but it's December 15th is the deadline, and it's like now you're just kind of like, well, the Lakers are kind of out of it, and this is the second year in a row. Last year we had Carmelo just before training camp.
Yeah, that's right. And all that, it's funny because the Melo thing was sad enough that I don't even really count him as a star requesting a trade or agreeing to a trade. He's on a different scale than Jimmy Butler. But that's actually what I'm most interested in at the moment is I was just tweeting about the idea that, like, this is now another star who doesn't seem particularly interested in playing next to LeBron, and all these Lakers fans hopped in my mentions and were like, no, this just means that Jimmy Butler has an agent who understands that the Lakers can't trade for him until December 15th, which is like, that's cool if you want to tell yourself that, but to me, I do think it's going to be really interesting to monitor the way the current generation of all-stars look at LeBron and who he can actually get to come play with him out there. And this is another one where, like, Jimmy it certainly sounds like he's angling to create a super team with like Kyrie Irving. And it's kind of strange that Lakers situation is perfect for another star to come slide in and go chase titles with LeBron and Ingram, and they've got some really nice pieces out there. But nobody's taken the bait so far.
And the funny thing to me with the Lakers is that it's they're really actually slowly kind of in trouble if you look at it this way. Their main targets, like Butler, was probably fourth on their list, right?
Yeah.
It's leaked. They're going to go after KD. They want Clay. They want Kawhi. I think Kawhi is going to end up staying in Toronto. That's just a pure guess on my end. But KD, I don't know. He's a wild card. He can go anywhere. But for all the flack he got for going to Golden State, I just don't buy him thinking like, oh, it'll be better if I go to LA and team up with LeBron. And we all know. And Clay ain't leaving.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. It's like, okay, so LeBron's about to be the biggest story in basketball again, and I'm sure that this year, I actually think the Lakers can surprise the people on the court. I really like Ingram. I really like, I really like Josh Hart. I don't want to get too excited about what he's going to be, but I think there are some interesting pieces around LeBron. So it's not like they've got nothing, but it's funny the way basketball fans and people around the league talk about like the frustration, or not the frustration, the free agent class next summer. It's so deep. There's stars everywhere, but like if you really look at realistic targets for a handful of teams, because this is true with the Sixers too, like there aren't that many names out there that are going to make sense, and a number of the people that are going to be free agents next summer are going to try to play together. And so, yeah, like the Lakers could just as easily be turning around next July and talking themselves into like Chris Middleton as a guy next to LeBron, and he'd be fine. But it's not like that's the step down from.
It's not the name.
Like Klay Thompson.
It's not the name. It's not what they envisioned. This year they thought they were getting LeBron and Paul George, and then it was LeBron and Kawhi. Right, and they're getting all this, and this was gonna be their run to back to the top, and now it's just like I would be a little more nervous if I were Laker fans, and you make a great point too. A lot of these guys looking to team up, and there's been a lot of talk of Kyrie and Jimmy kind of teaming up. It's almost like you kind of feel like whoever trades for Jimmy, they're in the running for Kyrie right then and there if they have a max spot, and the teams he listed, Brooklyn, the Knicks, and the Clippers, all have that ability, I think, to create a second max slot to sign a Kyrie. So it's almost like you feel like you're trading for Butler, but you're kind of also potentially trading for Kyrie.
I'm sure that's how teams are going to think about it. Right. I mean, and it's funny because when you talk about the Lakers, like if I were LA, and this is in fairness, like I don't know if I would want to trade for Jimmy Butler because he's old and injury prone and is about to become very expensive. And I think if you're looking to build something sustainable for the next 5 years, Jimmy Butler is actually a big risk. And so that applies to really any team that's going to be looking to deal for him. And maybe the Kyrie element kind of puts it over the top. I mean, to me, I still have no idea why Kyrie would ever leave Boston. But, you know, he's a weirdo. And he always has been, which is kind of wired a little differently. Jimmy Butler's the same way. So the one thing that popped into my head this afternoon is like the idea of Jimmy, Kyrie, and Kawhi all ending up on the same team next year would be pretty fantastic because they're unquestionably the three weirdest superstars we have, and maybe they just all flock together and go try to take down the Warriors.
Right. To steal a term from last night, the Predators, the movie The Predator, you know, they're the Looney Squad. And
exactly.
And I'm just gonna I'm gonna leave that reference there. You guys got to go see the movie to understand that.
I've never even seen the original Predator, so that's an embarrassing admission.
Where's the hang up button?
Maybe I'll get
Where's the hang up button? How do I hang up?
I deserve it. All right, I really do deserve a hang up on that one, but I'm doing the best I can. Every '90s action movie, I've got those covered. Okay, like I watch The Rock and Con Air and Die Hard with a Vengeance every month or two. But '80s, I've got some blind spots.
You got to go back and watch Predator. I mean, listen, you come to LA, I'll put it on the TV for you. Like I'll watch that anytime. That's one of the best.
Yeah,
So I
there
think
you go.
we got to fix that blind spot of yours. Um, where do you want him to end up though? Like with those three teams, or is there somewhere else? You know, where do you want to see if you could pick? Where do you want to see Butler go?
Well, it's really funny because this is another case where, like, this is another case where having this happen in mid-September is a curveball because I'm just like, I'm just now kind of conceptualizing some of these teams that we're going to be seeing this year and getting used to new rosters and new faces and new places. And now it's like, all right, so what if we threw Jimmy on the Celtics? What if we put Jimmy on the Rockets? Like, I don't really know. The one fit that I would have liked that sounds like is off the table at this point is Jimmy in Miami, because I think that team, if they could somehow keep Josh Richardson and pair him with Jimmy Butler, and maybe like throw some of those grinder role players they have at Tibbs, because they would be perfect for Thibodeau also. That would have been fun. But if the question is which of the three teams that he named, I think I would choose Brooklyn, because it would be a lot of fun to suddenly give that Nets franchise some legitimacy and add them to the superstar arms race and just sort of see what happens. I really have no idea where it would go. I think they'd be a playoff team, but then, you know, the ceiling's still pretty low, so who knows?
Right. For me, I actually think I'd like him to be with the Knicks. I want to see him with Porzingis. I know he's not healthy, but over time he'll get there. And
Yeah.
I think that'd be a fun pairing there in that regards. But you're right too though about Jimmy Butler fits that Miami sociopath grinding work ethic too to like a T. Like he would love it there with all those dudes and the body weights and that stuff and body fat. And
I love watching them. You know, I love watching those teams that Spoelstra has every year, and they just are always kind of a star short. They don't have anybody to close. They don't, like, if you look at their 10 guys, it's hard to even find 5 guys you'd want in a closing lineup from that group, because they're all good, but nobody's really that great. Even Dragic is sort of limited, especially as the years pass here. But the Knicks, you know, that would be – here's the thing. Jimmy Butler is aging. He's injury prone. He's about to be really expensive. And the Knicks do feel like destiny because of all of that. I think
you just described every Knick.
Yes, Jimmy Butler sounds so much better in theory than he will be in reality, so he's perfect for the Knicks.
Fair enough, man. What does this do, I mean, for Minnesota? I mean, you wrote a great piece, which I'm going to have a link to on the page, really kind of just of all the chaos, kind of outlining, you know, pretty much everybody's to blame in Minnesota. You know, Does this put Tibbs' job in jeopardy? It doesn't seem like him and Glenn Taylor are really on the same page. What happens with Cat, who hasn't signed that extension yet? I mean, does it make it more likely he signs the extension now, or is he going to start questioning the Wolves' future? Like, what do you foresee now for the Minnesota end of the spectrum?
That part is tough because what I was writing about yesterday is basically that, like, once you like. The Jimmy Butler rumors made everyone do a double take and kind of brought a lot of Wolves conversations that had been happening all summer kind of behind the scenes. Like, everybody I talked to, whenever the Wolves were brought up, would be like, man, things are not great out there. And then you ask them to elaborate, and they're just like, I don't know, Tibbs fired some staffers, and there's tension with different parts of the organization, and the superstars don't necessarily like each other, but it was sort of hard to pin it down to anything specific. And then the Jimmy stuff kind of brought all of that to the forefront this week. And I think first of all, once you start really thinking about it, every single person involved has been disappointing and frustrating, including Jimmy. I mean, it's weird for him to show up and not be able to kind of work with the younger guys and recognize that it's in his best interest to empower them. but he doesn't seem to be wired that way. And then Cat and Wiggins have been soft and frustrating in different ways. And ultimately, I think Tibbs will bear the responsibility for a lot of this, and he should. And if I were Glenn Taylor, I would definitely be thinking about moving on from him, because it hasn't even worked. I mean, Tibbs has been a terrible manager, and it just sounds like the environment behind the scenes is kind of toxic. But even as a coach, he's been a little bit disappointing, and it's tough all around. The one thing I wouldn't penalize Thibodeau for is the way the Butler thing specifically has played out, because I think this was always a possibility when he traded for Jimmy, and we all were just so excited that the Wolves were actually going to have a chance to make a run with Butler in Minnesota, that everybody kind of poo-pooed the possibility that he could just leave in a year and a half,
right,
and the Wolves will be left with nothing. And so I kind of feel bad turning around and roasting Tibbs for the way this has played out. But I do think the way everything else has happened is definitely an indictment of the person in charge.
Yeah, and you touched on it a little bit too. The one thing that was really disappointing for me with Tibbs is he took a year off of coaching. He did the coaching tour, right? Going to visit other teams' training camps and practices and picking people's brains and stuff like that. And then he just came back as the same old Tibbs. And no evolution, no different thought process. Maybe I should play guys less minutes. Maybe I should try to empower the bench.
Isn't it incredible?
It's amazing.
It's like Tibbs is in 2009. None of the controversy, none of the progression in the way the NBA thinks about minutes. Because when he was in Chicago, the Spurs were already kind of on the forefront of realizing how much rest can help extend guys and just not only their entire careers, but even just during the regular season. It became a real advantage for San Antonio. And then the rest of the league caught on, and now everybody does it that way. And Tibbs is just I don't know whether he doesn't believe in it or there's something he just is wired to think about things in the short term, but it's kind of incredible how little he's grown on that front.
Yeah, and frustrating in that regard. So, it's a weird situation. We do know that Glenn Taylor is not the type of guy to pay somebody not to coach a team. That's so that could kind of make for an interesting part of the problem for him in that regard. But let's get back.
Well,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was cutting you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, the last thing I would say on Minnesota is that I think we're seeing, it's the one thing that you can kind of follow year after year in the NBA is there are always a handful of teams with shaky ownership situations that fail for reasons that are hard to explain. And generally, the best explanation is looking at the owners. And Taylor is one of them. I would also say, the Sixers owners haven't been great quietly behind the scenes. And it hasn't cost Philly yet, but it just seems like they've kind of, the Elton Brand hiring didn't seem particularly inspired, and it took them 5 months to do it. And they're just, that team has always been in a weird place, New Orleans. And so it's just one of those things that I think gets underplayed when you look at teams all over the league. It's having a coherent vision from the owner is really, really important.
Well, that's the thing. The top teams in the NBA all have a stable owner and a vision and an idea of where they want to go. We didn't touch on the Clippers being on that list, and I think that all has to do with your boy Lee Jenkins already already showing his worth already for the Clippers.
I'm happy for him, man. It's funny, man. I am really excited to talk to Lee about what he's doing, first of all. And second of all, the Clippers are going to be in the mix for a lot of these guys. And it's going to be a really exciting time to sort of be a part of that organization. And so, yeah, I did not expect to see the Clippers in the Woj tweet, but when I saw them, I was like, hell yeah, good for Lee. I'm glad that he's gonna kind of be at the forefront of all this stuff.
Well, I mean, just breaking news. Like, I knew the list was 2, and then he heard that Lee Jenkins was there, so he went, he added them on there.
They really hit it off during that profile last year. You
Right.
know? But it must have been it.
So let's go back to what the originally scheduled plan for the podcast, which was we were going to go into each division in the Eastern Conference and kind of just go through, what teams we're excited for and what teams worries you the most. It's the only reason why divisions are helpful, only for this case in this podcast. Otherwise, they're meaningless altogether. And I want to start out with the Southeast Division because I want to start out also with I want you to go in on your Wizards.
Okay. So I'm feeling good as a Wizards fan, which might be a red flag. I do think that it's going to come down to how healthy and engaged John Wall is and how healthy and engaged Markieff Morris is. And Wall, I feel pretty confident in the idea that he can just be 80 to 90% of what he was 2 years ago. Markieff, I mean, who knows? Like, that's a total crapshoot. But I think that he's very important to their identity defensively, particularly at the end of games. Like, I hope that Scott Brooks understands that playing Dwight Howard in every fourth quarter is probably not a great idea. And it just they're a lot more dynamic when they go small with Markieff at the 5, or even Markieff is super valuable at the 4 too. So what version of Markieff they're getting will impact their depth, I think, more than people realize. But look, I think the Wizards are going to be the 4th or 3rd best team in the East, and they will have the talent to push anyone in a playoff series. So, knock on wood, I think it's going to be a fun year. I think the rest of the league is kind of sleeping on them a little bit.
Okay. I mean, you can probably put me in that category of sleeping on them a little bit. I don't have them in the top 3, because I am worried.
So who do you have in the top 3?
Oh, to me in the top 3, it's going to be Toronto, Boston, and Philly in any order.
Yeah.
Between those 3. And the big reason for me with the Wizards isn't the talent, because they're definitely a talented squad. Just every year there seems to be chemistry issues, and how do they fix that? They went and got Austin Rivers, who was, good with the Clippers, but was somewhat polarizing in the locker room at points. And then you got, to fix chemistry, you went and got Dwight Howard, who's always a beacon for a guy who fixes chemistry. Those are the things that scare me about that team.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned Austin Rivers, because to me, I mean, the chemistry with Gortat at the 5 last year was so bad by the end of the year, and Gortat was so old that swapping him out for Dwight, I really do think will be a net positive. And I don't think that the chemistry will be as bad as it was with Gortat, because it's hard to imagine it could be. And I think that Dwight at least brings some positives, where I think Gortat was really kind of slacking by the end, and through no fault of his own, actually. Slacking is not the right word, but his game had just dropped off a little bit, and beyond screening for Wall and Beal, he wasn't bringing that much to the table. Austin Rivers, though, that is the chemistry issue to watch, because who knows what that's going to be like. I agree that he is polarizing. That's a diplomatic way to put it. He's a special personality and thinks very highly of himself. And so the 3 of those guards, Wall, Beal, and Rivers, I still can't believe Austin Rivers is going to be on the Wizards, but it's going to be an adventure with those 3, man. It really will be.
It's going to be quite interesting in that regards, because he truly thinks, and this is me just speculating, but I just get he thinks he's on the level of Wall, and that's kind of
Oh yeah,
the issue, and that was
part of the charm, but
right.
it'll make things complicated.
So it's that whole issue and stuff. So that's, to me, that's what holds them back. And then on top of it, I'm just not a Scott Brooks fan. I don't.
Yep.
So like all of that, I feel like, the three teams, two of them have coaches that I really believe in, and I don't know what to expect from Nick Nurse, but and we'll talk about them when we get in there. But they added Kawhi to that team could be one of the best defensive teams in the league, if Kawhi's healthy and back to his normal self. But in the Southeast Division, we also have the Heat, the Hornets, the Hawks, and the Magic. Are any of them interest you, or who worries you in that group?
None of them. No, honestly, none of them really interest me. I do like watching the Heat every night. I mean, they punch above their weight class pretty consistently, and they just have these waves of guys that they can throw at teams, and so that is kind of an underrated league pass pleasure if you're just watching too much basketball all year, which I think I'll probably be doing. But beyond that, the other teams in that division bum me out. Charlotte and Orlando, it feels like they've been having the same season for the last 4 or 5 years, and I wish that they would get a little bit more aggressive trying to shake things up. And then Atlanta, I love what Atlanta is going to be doing. I think I am in the minority on the basketball internet in that I'm not in love with Luka Doncic, and I really respect the guts it took to look at Doncic at 3 and say, you know what, we actually like Trae Young better, and we're going to trade down and try to pick up a top 10 pick. And that makes sense to me. It may not age particularly well because Trae Young will either be really good or borderline unplayable. But beyond that, there's not much there in that division. It's kind of like no man's land in the NBA.
Yeah, I honestly think it is probably the worst division. None of them interest me. I do worry about the Hawks a little bit because I'm different. I'm on the Doncic bandwagon. And
are you?
Yeah,
there you go.
I've been there for a while. But what worries me, and it's nothing to do with Trae Young. What just kind of sucks about it is that's it. They're going to be tied to each other forever. Because of that trade. If Doncic has a great year and Trae Young just has an average year, they're still going to get panned for it. Just because that's the way the internet acts. But
exactly.
And it's not fair, but it's just going to be unfair to the kid. But I'm very interested.
Yeah.
I'm worried about them, but I do want to watch him because I want to watch Trae Young because he can pass, man. I love guys that can pass, and I want to see if he
can. He's a great passer. The thing with Trae Young that kind of scares me a little bit is that he's going to need to he can't create space without the jumper, and so he's going to need to hit at about 38 to 40% from 3 to really have any kind of shot at being effective. And that's one where we just don't know. And some of the shots he takes are a higher degree of difficulty than normal threes. It's not like Klay Thompson hitting open threes from the corner. Trae Young is 35 feet from the hoop off the dribble. We'll see whether that translates to the NBA. I do enjoy the crazy stakes of that trade, though, because it is true that they're going to be unfairly linked forever, and that's just the way it goes. But I think Doncic has as high a ceiling as Trae Young and a much higher floor, so he's definitely safer. But people talk about Trae Young as if he's just kind of this throw-in guy that Atlanta is stupidly trying to talk themselves into, whereas I think if the 3 does materialize, he's going to be awesome offensively. So it'll be a fun kind of experiment over the next couple of years.
For sure. And before we move on to the next division, because this is a shitty division, except for the Wizards.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me tell you about my friends at Brand Active Media. They're one of those places.
Right.
You go to a wedding and they have the photo booth and everybody puts on a weird hat or whatnot, and things like that. But they've also done big time events with the NFL at the NFL draft. They were at the NBA All-Star game. They were with the LA Galaxy. They do tons and tons of events, nationwide. They do a lot of private parties too. AYSO soccer starting up. This is a great time to have, if you're a parent, have your kids come and, set it up for your kids and let's have fun with these pictures. Let me ask you this question, Andrew. Who on the Wizards would you jump in a photo booth with? You can pick 2 Wizards. Who are your 2 Wizards you're going to jump in the photo booth with?
It's a tough one. Really, anybody but Dwight Howard, I would be excited about. I think I would cherish a photo booth moment with Austin Rivers, perhaps. Kelly Oubre, though, is like the clear number 1 for me on that list. So Oubre, and then I gotta amend my answer. I don't want to be in a photo booth with Austin Rivers, but Oubre and anyone else.
Well, my thing with Oubre is I feel like he would try to steal the show. He
definitely would. I would be completely overshadowed, but that's fine. It would be an honor. You
wouldn't even be in the picture, is what I'm saying. Like, he just jumped right in front of you. That's just my feel for Oubre. But guys, check out my friends at brandactivemedia.com. Let them know Mo sent you, and that they're going to let you print up all these pictures for free. That's all I got. Check them out, brandactivemedia.com. And now we're going to jump to the Atlantic Division, which I think is the best division in the conference. They have the Sixers, the Celtics, the Nets, the Knicks, the Raptors. 2 of these teams could have Jimmy Butler by the end of this conversation.
I was going to say, Jimmy Butler's Nets in the Atlantic Division. Here we go. I am going to be watching these teams all year. I won't watch much Knicks, and probably not the Nets either if they don't get Jimmy. But the Raptors are top 5 most interesting. I think the Celtics are going to win 60 games. And the Sixers, I think that they're going to fall off. But Simmons and Embiid are both so captivating that, there's no such thing as a boring Sixers game, at least as long as Embiid is healthy. So they're going to be really interesting as well. So there's a lot going on,
Well, let's go to this. Why do you think the Sixers will fall off? Because this is a common thought. This is a common thought, like I see through the internet, and I don't necessarily buy it. But what's your reasoning for it?
So here are the reasons I would bet on them falling off. And number 1, I don't think that they were as good as their record indicated last year. I mean, they closed with, I think it was 16 straight wins to end the regular season. It was like 15 or 16. And so that kind of inflated things a little bit. They were playing a bunch of teams who weren't very good, and that helped. But I also think that, and this is one where, like, I've talked to Sixers people who clown me for thinking this, but I do think that they're going to miss Ersan Ilyasova and Marco Bellinelli, because I think those 2 guys helped fill out the rotation in some important ways, and particularly helped with Simmons, who is awesome in a lot of different ways, but I also think, like, he doesn't really have a move beyond, like, his signature move, let's say, is to barrel into the lane, freak out the defense, and then, like, inexplicably decide not to shoot and heave it out to the 3-point line. And that works when you've got shooters out there, and it worked really well for the Sixers down the stretch last season. But now they just lost 2 threats on the perimeter and replaced them with Wilson Chandler. So, like, I don't know how that's going to go. I think it's going to be a challenge at various points during the season. But if you want to make the case for them being awesome and being top 3, like, if Embiid is healthy all year, it's going to be very difficult for them to to win fewer than 50 games. Let's say that.
I mean, I understand that. The couple of my thoughts with it, is if the reports are true about Fultz, if they get just 50% of Fultz, I think that makes up for Bellinelli right there.
That's definitely true. And Fultz, it's funny, man. I don't even count Fultz as like part of their rotation, and I hope I'm wrong. But
right.
That's definitely a accounts for some of the difference between my pessimism and your optimism.
Right. And then, this is going to be a reach, so you can definitely yell at me or make fun of me for it too. But
here we go.
I kind of like them getting Mike Muscala.
That's not a bad call, all right? It really isn't, because again, Ersan Ilyasova, I'm not saying that he's that good.
No, but you were right. You were right.
Muscala can give you like 90% of him. He could be valuable. You're right.
You were right though about what Ilyasova brought to that team. Like he was me, he was more important than Bellinelli. I felt like, listen, Bellinelli will shoot you in games and sure as hell shoot you out of games. And
yeah, Bellinelli. Who was it the Wizards traded for? Oh, it was Bogdanovich 2 years ago, and he showed up in DC and like shot the lights out for 3 weeks and looked incredible and won them like maybe 2 or 3 games, and then just like didn't hit a shot for the final 2 months of the season, and Scott Brooks kept playing him 20 to 25 minutes a game every night. And I think that there's some of that with Bellinelli where like he'll get hot a couple times, such that like fans and coaches remember him as dangerous, and then you forget there are all these nights where he's like 2 of 7 and not playing any defense for the entire time he's on the floor. So it's tough.
Yeah, and just like he would shoot shots, and I'm like, really, you're gonna shoot that one? Even in the Boston series, I was like, your feet haven't even touched the ground. Like,
yeah.
You caught the pass in midair and you're still trying to shoot it. Like, he frustrated me as a player. But I see with Muscala, I think he can do stuff. The one thing that he doesn't do that Ilyasova did that really helped that team was he rebounded really well. It's something I don't think Muscala does a great job of. So that's going to be kind of where they miss him. I think, but I'm surprised when people are really kind of, I felt like more people were just upset that they didn't sign a big free agent, so it was a failure. And
yeah.
And to me, I just kind of feel like it's really just the same team, and assuming Embiid's healthy, that these guys kind of, their main key guys can improve a little bit. I think they're on track.
I think that's a good take, and you may be right. And Embiid's health is another reason I wouldn't feel great about trusting them to go win like 55 games, because it's just, I don't want to jinx anything. You know what I mean? Like, let's wait and see if he can play a second healthy season. The Bellinelli thing, you're dead on, and it's not that I think they're going to miss Marco Bellinelli specifically. It's just that I think if they're not going to get a ton from Fultz, they're going to miss another playable guy, like another 7th or 8th man. And I think that that might just it probably won't matter in the playoffs, but it might be the difference between winning 52 and 48 games. But they're still, I would say they're going to be the scariest non-Celtics team in the playoffs once they get there.
And then let's talk about the Celtics, though. They're bringing back a bunch of guys. Listen,
yes, it's disgusting how good they are.
They're stacked, and it's one of these things. This is a great problem to have, but it's a matter of like at a certain point, I worry a little bit with guys like if they struggle a little bit, the Kyrie whispers are going to get louder. Is Tatum going to want to have more of a role? Is he going to have to take a step back with and defer to Hayward? Is he willing to do that? And just all those kinds of fun. Like it looks great on paper, but you have to put these things together, and everybody just kind of glosses over that. And I'm like, guys, it's a lot harder than you think. Like, this is a tough coaching job for Brad Stevens. Listen, it's a great problem to have. It's definitely first world NBA problems, but it's a challenge here, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like concern for Brad Stevens this year is sort of like looking at somebody who inherits a ton of money and has to find ways to like shelter that income from taxes. It's like, it's the best problem to have. And I think I hear all the concerns, and some of them are definitely valid, particularly with like Jalen and Jason Tatum. Those guys took steps forward last year, and they also, they're coming into their own, and it's going to be really hard for one of them to score like 25 one night and then score 6 points and play 18 minutes the next night. And that might be what happens this year. The thing that I like about Boston is, number one, they have always been really good about staggering their stars. And even back to a couple years ago when they didn't really have stars, and it was like, let's stagger Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk or whatever. Like that. But they've always been really good about sort of mixing and matching lineups. And I think right now, with all the talent they have, that's just going to give them even more flexibility in that regard, and will make them pretty scary for like the full 48 minutes. And then the main thing is, we've never seen Brad Stevens fail, and he's had a couple different types of teams to try to deal with, and different challenges to navigate. And every single time he's sort of exceeded expectations and made it look kind of seamless. And so until we see signs that he's like going to struggle or can't get there, he's getting the benefit of the doubt for me.
Yeah, I think my problem is, and this is also because I'm an asshole, if Rondo doesn't get hurt, I think they lose that Chicago series.
No question. And as a Celtics hater, I'm still pissed off that didn't happen. All right.
Right.
Like, I was thrilled when it looked like Rondo was going to take down the Celtics. It was amazing. And so it's not that I wouldn't put Stevens over Pop or whatever. But I also think like that Celtics team was never that great. And that's what we saw more than anything in that first round.
I'm pretty close, by the way, putting Stevens over Pop, and that's hard for me.
Well, I see. Yeah, I figured it would be kind of blasphemous on this podcast. I mean, where do you stand with it? I'm curious.
Here's the thing, like, let's just look at what Pop did with this Spurs team last year that was garbage. I mean, they had no place in the playoffs with the roster that they had. And, their best player, who was a top 3 MVP candidate the year before, plays 9 games. Nothing but controversy surrounding the team. Every day it was a media storm for these guys, which is something that they try to avoid every chance they get as an organization. And it just kind of ends up into a whole thing. And they still end up, like a game or two away from the 3rd seed? I mean, they're also nearly a game out of the playoffs, but they were in that jumbled mess when really, if you told me at the beginning of the year Kawhi's only playing 9 games, I'm like, they're probably not making the playoffs. And Pop,
no question.
And Pop just continues to kind of get it together with these, with these rosters and put these teams together. So, it's really close. I still have Pop above him and stuff, but also Brad Stevens has done a great job with the Celtics since he got there. As you said, he hasn't really failed at a task besides us lamenting Rondo getting hurt, which really has nothing to do with his coaching abilities. I mean, he hasn't really failed as in the coaching aspect. It's even when they had Gordon Hayward goes down game 1, his team's ready. They win like 16 straight games that start of the season. Then they lose Kyrie halfway through the season for basically the year, and they go to game 7 of the conference finals. Like, it's he's just a damn good coach. I mean, the play at the end of game 3, I think, against Philly in the playoffs, where he gets Al Horford a bucket, basically to win the game, was just a beautifully diagrammed play. And it's, this is an example of, like, that's just a great basketball coach. And it's not to belittle any other coach. It's just, he just knew exactly what was going to happen, and he knew exactly what the defense was going to do, and he took advantage of it. So, and that's very Pop-like. And also, because the way I know Pop is, Pop would be pissed off if I wasn't willing to concede at a certain point that Pop may fall off. Like, he'd be mad at me if I wasn't being honest. So it's getting closer, and this year could be interesting.
It is very close, yeah. And I guess here's how I would explain it. Number one, I think if you're looking for the difference between Stevens and Popovich, I do think that Stevens might be a little bit more flexible and capable of dealing with kind of different personalities to where like Stevens succeeded with Jordan Crawford for a couple months, and like I don't know if Jordan Crawford could ever last more than a week in the Spurs building. But like that could be a difference. And if I were running a team and choosing a coach, Brad Stevens would be my first choice before Popovich. However, Popovich is so cool and he's been good for so long that, like, to me, he's got the top spot almost by default, and as like an honorary position for as long as he's in the NBA, because he's too awesome in too many different ways to dock him any.
It's hard. And, Stevens is like a younger Pop to me because,
yes.
Pop was always able to relate with his guys. Now, he had his system and he had his my way or the highway, but, he was always good talking with his guys after practice and whatnot and doing all that fun stuff. So, Stevens could just be a younger Pop. And eventually a young guy comes for the throne, man. And I think if it's not this year, it's going to happen next season.
Well, and if you're looking at the Celtics, to bring it back to that Atlantic division, I think that's kind of what I see in Boston, is they are half Warriors and half Spurs. And they're Warriors in that, like, a lot of this is only possible because of once-in-a-generation luck, basically, where it was like the Nets trade kind of anchored everything, and then they found Stevens, who was sort of like their Steph Curry, and kind of like elevated the baseline for the whole team and allowed them to go recruit other stars. And it's just been like wildly successful and is sort of impossible to replicate. But then the Spurs side of it is like they've got a really defined system, and we've seen a track record of like a lot of different types of players go in there and end up kind of punching above their weight class and looking better than they actually are. And so that's really valuable too. So, I mean, like, again, I don't love the Celtics, but they are going to be a real pain in the ass this year for the whole league.
They're going to be a pain in the ass for the next 10 years, most likely. We got to talk a little bit about the Raptors because Canada gets upset if you don't. But they can put together a hell of a defensive lineup with just Kawhi, Siakam, OG Anunoby. Like, I'm kind of excited to watch this team. I have my questions about Nick Nurse. This is his first. You get a head coaching job. You finally get the job of your dreams, and now it's like, oh, we're expected to be in the championship. Like, that's a lot of pressure for a first-time head coach. I know he was in the G League. I mean, that's going to be interesting. At the very least, if they don't make it to the conference finals, it's going to be considered a failure, sort of thing. But what's your take on the Raptors?
The Raptors, I'm kind of just tired of this team and this organization, because it feels like every year they are not as good as people want them to be, and yet weighed down with all these expectations. And I do think you're right that that's the way people are going to be talking about this team for the next 6 or 7 months. Like, can they make a conference finals run? Can they make a finals run? And I just don't really believe in what they have. Kawhi is good enough. Like, he's got Hall of Fame talent. He's one of like 6 guys you can look at in the league and be like, that's a Hall of Famer if he can keep it together for 10 or 15 years. But at the same time, like, I've never been more skeptical about him for all kinds of different reasons, health and otherwise. And then the rest of their team, like, I don't know. I don't want to get too negative, but like, I don't really care about watching Jonas Valanciunas for another 8 months. I don't really care about trying to get excited about OG Anunoby, or I love Fred VanVleet. I like a lot of these guys individually, but it's just like collectively they don't seem to have enough, and yet we're all going to have to kind of pretend they do and then just wait for this to play out. And it's like, this is very dark, but I just can't, I don't know, I can't get into it.
Hey, don't plan any trips to Canada anytime soon, Andrew, please. Stay on American soil. I would fear for your safety.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel? Are you into it? Like, I mean, you've got the Spurs connections too. So like, where are you at with Kawhi?
No, I mean, listen, I honestly don't like the way the whole Kawhi thing shook out. and things like that. And it just, the more I think about it, the more I just feel shitty about just the way he went about it. I think, and the stuff that really bothered me was like, he was, and I don't know if this is going to be a hot take or not, but he was very cowardly in the sense of like, he wouldn't just say it to the Spurs face. Even when they're like, they're going to have the meeting. They're going to have the meeting. And it was like, well, they're afraid of having Kawhi and Pop in the room alone together. And I'm like, listen, if you want to leave.
I'm wondering, so did they never have that meeting? Because I remember that. The meeting, the lunch with Popovich was like a big thing. And I was imagining the two of them breaking bread and sharing a bottle of wine. Did that just never happen?
Well, from what I understood, and I could be wrong in that element, but it felt like it was just never the two of them. It was always, Uncle Dennis or an agent or something in there as well. And it's like, almost like they needed somebody to moderate it to make sure Kawhi went through with it. And I'm like, listen, dude, you're not a child anymore. Like, you gotta man up. If you're, and I don't, you just gotta step up and be an adult and just say, hey, like, I want out. And you have to say it to the organization has done a lot for him as he has for them. So there's a mutual thing there, but this, as a respect and a professional level, like, you got to just kind of say, and this is a legend. This is Pop. Like, I understand it's not easy, but at the same time, you got to just kind of give him that respect.
And you know what? That's exactly how I feel. It's like, I'm not one of those people who is like, you owed it to Spurs fans to be out there and playing through an injury or whatever, or you owed it to Spurs fans and the media to explain yourselves. Like, it's fine if they didn't want to do that, and that's never really been Kawhi's style. But to just kind of ghost the entire organization, and Popovich specifically, but also like teammates who they've been through a lot together, and for Kawhi to just kind of turn a cold shoulder to everybody and not ever really communicate how he felt to the team. It would be one thing if he'd actually been like wronged in a meaningful way, and which I'm sure he does feel like his trust had been betrayed for one reason or another. But like, still, it's just one of those things that as an adult in any industry, like, you go and have the hard conversation. It's part of life. And for him not to do that kind of reflects poorly on him.
Yeah. And like the stories that were leaking out afterwards, I mean, they clearly were protecting this kid. There were a lot of bad stories, him in New Orleans, the All-Star weekend, and his team. And, I mean, the fact that didn't even leak until this summer was something, or when the Spurs organization would show up at the Jimmy's training in New York, like they're sneaking him out the back. Like, all of those things are just like bad, like just bad taste in my mouth. So, I think my feeling is I think he's healthy. Just because he's working out with these top guys. We've seen the picture with him, KD, and LeBron, and that had Lakers fans' hairs on fire. But, like, he's not training against those guys unless he feels he's healthy and ready to go. So that's actually what I wonder about.
I would love to know, like, what those guys think of his game, because I'm sure they're going back to, like, their respective teams with their reports on
100%.
where Kawhi is.
Right.
So it's like, literally like 99.9% of the population is looking at Kawhi on the Raptors as like, who the hell knows what version of him we're getting. But then like the 7 or 8 best players in the world have all been working out with Kawhi and could give like a pretty good answer in terms of where he's at.
Right. And the other aspect of it is I just think on the court stuff, I just think he can bring a lot more to that team that DeMar DeRozan never could. Especially defensively, and that's my thing. I don't feel like they're kind of similar in the way they play. I just think he's way better at it.
Yeah, I agree with some of that. I do think that DeRozan's defense, people fixate on that a lot. There aren't many guards in the league who actually play defense anyways, and so I don't know how valuable it really is. I mean, it certainly helps, but like, I think a big man who can guard and protect the rim and anchor the defense is a lot more important than a guard. And obviously, Kawhi is like the best defender on the planet. I mean, he's Scottie Pippen when he's healthy and kind of locked in. The thing I wonder about, and you probably have as good a read on it as almost anybody, but like him outside of that Spurs offense, I wonder whether he's going to be quite as effective as he was offensively. I don't think he's going to be bad, but like toward the end of his time in San Antonio when he was actually playing, he was like a 30-point a night guy, and I don't know if he's going to be that level of scorer for them. What do you think?
Well, the thing was offensively in that season where he was great, you know, he was doing a lot more one-on-one stuff. It wasn't even a lot of the offense. You know, it wasn't the offense getting him a lot of stuff. It was him going to create stuff. You know, now he didn't create a lot for others or anything like that, but he went and got his shot, and he was capable of doing that. So I don't feel like I can see that not changing at all. Again, assuming health and stuff, and it's hard. You've been out of the game for a year. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge. There's going to be rust. I don't care how many workouts you do.
Sure. And I agree. That's what I loved about watching him. Is it was like toward the end, it was like a light bulb had gone on, and he actually started to play like Kobe almost, and was but like a more efficient version of Kobe, where he was just killing people one-on-one and could do that. But I feel like that the safety net of having like a killer offensive scheme next to him as he did all that probably helps some. But you're right. That's a good point.
So that'd be interesting there. I want to move on real quick if you got time. I know we're going over a bit. I'm not sure how that works with your schedule, but we're not going to talk about the Knicks or the Nets unless they get Jimmy Butler in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah, check Twitter. Let's see.
Yeah, let me hit the refresh. No, he's still not on either of those teams, so they don't get to get talked about too. We've already spoken a lot about them, so we'll leave them out.
Yep.
Real quickly, let's just dive into the Central Division if you got time. I know I'm cheating here a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I got 5 minutes.
Perfect. And that's all we need for the Central Division, because really there's only two teams I care about in that division, and it's the Bucks and the Pacers. And to me, like, the Cavs, it's just not going to be that interesting without LeBron. The Pistons could be interesting, but at the same time, I'm tired of them. I'm just not really. I don't really care about them.
I feel bad. The Pistons are all tired of each other. Like, I don't know, man. I saw a report where Reggie Jackson, they were talking about his health this summer, and apparently like an ankle injury didn't heal, and he hasn't been able to play basketball for the last 4 months, which is like, it's already bad enough when you're a team that's counting on Reggie Jackson to like be the guy and one of the focal points on offense. But then to hear him be like, "Oh yeah, like I didn't play basketball this summer, but it should be a good year." It's got to be pretty tough as a Pistons fan.
Yeah, it's just not an easy situation for them right now, just because. And then you have two big guys that you have to figure out how to make it work between Blake and Drummond and all of that stuff, and all. We can leave that out. But real quickly, what's your expectations for the Bucks this year? They made a big change in the coaching. I think Coach Bud's really going to help them. They got your boy Ilyasova. They finally have a coach for Giannis. What's your impressions of the Bucks?
I like them. I don't want to get too excited. The Bucks are similar to Josh Hart for me, where like as I mentioned 45 minutes ago, I like Josh Hart a lot, but I don't want to jinx him by expecting him to be better than he actually is. And that's kind of how I feel about the Bucks. Is like I've always had a soft spot for Giannis, and I think that they're like. You can't overstate the upgrade from coaching that they're going to have this year. I mean, it is like they were just so, and that's not even necessarily about Budenholzer. It's more about how awful Kidd and I forget the other guy's name. Wasn't it Frank something? It's who knows?
Yeah, right.
It doesn't matter. But I think Budenholzer is going to be great for them, and I think similar to the Sixers, where like having one or two extra guys made a big difference for them, adding Brogdon back into that rotation takes them from like 4 or 5 playable starter level guys to 5 or 6 or maybe 6 or 7 now that they've got Ilyasova and Brook Lopez. Like they're going to be much deeper than they were, even though than they were at the end of last year against the Celtics. Even though they haven't like added a ton of pieces, but I'm bullish on them. I think they'll finish somewhere in the top half of the East.
Okay, I like them. I think for me the big thing for the Bucks, if they're really going to kind of make the leap, it's Giannis, and it's not Giannis's shooting, it's Giannis's ability to be a playmaker, which isn't something we see a lot of. You know, we see him get to the rim and do his thing at the, you know, with that super long step and those strides, but you know, you don't see a lot of playmaking Giannis, and I think that's something they really need more of to get to that next level.
Well, yeah, I agree with you, and it's funny because Giannis is LeBron. Like, Giannis is like 2008, 2009 LeBron in a lot of respects, but I think the big difference is sort of like feel and basketball kind of IQ. I mean, I don't know how you would want to describe it, but like, I think his feel for the game is not quite where even someone like Ben Simmons is, and I mean LeBron is like one of the smartest basketball players we've seen in 70 years. So like it's hard to compare anyone to him. But like that, the passing is not quite. It's decent, but it's not nearly as incredible as LeBron was, and so that is definitely an area where he can improve some.
Yeah, and the feel is something that I just feel like he's come late to the game. And I feel like that takes a long time to develop there. Let's touch on the Pacers, and then I will stop holding you hostage.
No, it's been fun, man. I needed this to help process my thoughts after the Jimmy stuff.
There we go. What's your thought on the Pacers?
I think the Pacers are going to be okay. I'm a little bummed out by the way they handled this summer. I wanted them to try and get Aaron Gordon, and ultimately, I forget what Aaron Gordon got. I think did he get maxed by Orlando?
I think he might have.
Yeah, so Gordon was probably not going to be on the table regardless, but that was the type of guy that I would have wanted them to get, and instead they kind of got some like placeholders. I mean, I don't really understand what the McDermott deal was about, and Tyreek Evans. I would be more excited about this year's Pacers team if I trusted last year's Tyreek Evans. But I don't know if that's kind of the real guy. And I don't know if Darren Collison can hit 45% of his threes again. And so it's one of those things where, like, additionally, the other thing I would mention actually is, you know, the Pacers turned a lot of people into believers by pushing that Cavs team in the first round, and everyone was like, wow, maybe Victor Oladipo is an MVP candidate. But, like, in retrospect, that Cavs team was a total mess.
Yes.
And really, like, I mean, we saw it throughout the next couple weeks of the playoffs. I mean, they went and dominated that Raptors team, but, like, the Cavs were a mess. And so I don't know if we should read too much into the playoff performance against that kind of broken version of Cleveland.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said it, because that's something I've been really like harping on. Like, people saying like they pushed the Cavs to 7, you know, they're going to be great next year. I'm like, yo, it's the hardest thing to do in the NBA for a team is taking that big leap forward after a successful year. You know, we've seen it time again where like a team has a good run in the playoffs or a good showing, and then the next year kind of just fall off. You know, it's a common theme, really, in general, and it's extremely hard to do. And I kind of look at them as that kind of candidate. Now the East is so bad, they're definitely going to be a playoff team, and I'm with you. Like Tyreek Evans, I'm not sold. I'm not convinced this is really Tyreek Evans. Listen. Darren Collison shoots 45% from 3 again this year. Like, I'll be stunned. Like, I don't know what I would like eat my shoe or something, but I'm not going to do that even if he does. So I'm not going to promise anything.
Don't go on record with that.
No, I'm not going to.
Here's the thing. I'll be really, really impressed with like all of those guys if they can actually go do that. And I think there's definitely room for Domantas Sabonis to grow. There's room for Miles Turner to grow. And, it didn't seem like there was great chemistry playing those two together last year, but if they can do that this year and sort of, if some of that material is, the Pacers will be able to hang with like anybody outside of Boston in the East. I don't see it happening, but if they can pull it off, it'll be because like all those guys are better than any of us kind of give them credit for.
Right, and for me, if they pull it off, it's because Miles Turner makes the leap. Like, this is the year he has to make that leap, And
what do you think of him? Because to me, that's a guy where like he has so many good tools. I would be really, really surprised if like the light bulb suddenly goes on this year, because he's had a lot of opportunity so far in Indiana, and so far he's been kind of good, but rarely puts it together for more than like a couple games in a row,
Yeah, like that's it. Consistency is a big issue. I mean, it was one of those things where, like, after his rookie year, everybody was like, this is going to be the guy. Like, they're going to build around him. And I was just kind of like, perplexed. I was just like, really? Him? Like, I don't...
Well, he showed some flashes. I might have been saying the same thing after his rookie year.
But it felt too early, though, to really kind of anoint that.
It was. And in retrospect, it definitely was.
And the one thing I'd say is that, there was, I wrote about him, Om Yomasuk for ESPN wrote a great piece on, he's really dedicated himself this offseason. He's doing yoga. Everybody takes a picture, a before and after. I'd like to, but my before and after would just look progressively worse. But all these guys,
dangerous
for us
lay folk. So I saw some of that with Miles Turner, and that's one of the things where, like, I don't know how much I should trust this. Like, if it's real, I feel like particularly you hear stuff like that about guys in the Magic organization, for instance, like Jonathan Isaac has put on like 25 pounds and looks like a whole different person. It's like, I'll believe it when we make it to November and he's a useful player. And same is true with Miles Turner, where like it seems like he's got all-star talent, but I'd rather wait and see it before I get too excited about the Pacers.
Yeah, and my thing is, I'm even further than like, I expect to see it in November. My question is, do you stay with it? Can you keep it up in February and March?
Yeah.
Like I was talking to somebody the other day about like that. There was a couple of years ago, Jordan Clarkson looked like he kind of clicked on defense, for about a week and a half. And everybody was talking about like, wow, Jordan Clarkson's defending, he's playing hard. I think it was like Luke Walton's first year. And like everybody was
that was a Lakers hallmark.
Yeah.
Every one of those young guys would have like a great 2 weeks, and you would be like, wow. All the Lakers haters are wrong. The future is brighter than it's ever been. And then it's like, all right, it's Jordan Clarkson.
Right. And there was even like they were interviewing Drew Hanlon about what he's done defensively to help Clarkson improve. And I'm telling you, man, 2 weeks later, that thing was gone, and he's back to what he normally was. So it's a question of can you sustain that and keep that through, on to February, March. Andrew, I've stolen way more time than I should have of yours. I appreciate you coming on. Plug your stuff. You have the best podcast with you and Ben Golliver on SI Open Floor. But plug your work.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, people can go download Open Floor. We don't have any new episodes this week. Ben is on vacation, traveling through the American South, actually. I think he's in Tennessee as we speak. But next week we're going to be back to doing 2 pods per week, and you can read me on Sports Illustrated, SI.com. And Mo, man, it's always fun, so I appreciate you having me on.
No, man, I appreciate you coming. Thank you so much.
All right, man, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bud. That's it for our show. Be sure to rate us, like us, leave reviews on Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and you can catch us on YouTube now. Be sure to check out all the content on thejumpball.net, and you can support me on patreon.com. Have a good week.